The explosion ripped through the harbor like a second sunrise. Flames tore upward as a cargo container split open, shrapnel screaming across wet concrete. Men scattered. Sirens wailed too late. At the center of the chaos stood Jin Woo-suk, untouched, coat flaring in the heat as if the fire itself refused to claim him. A gunman charged from the smoke. Woo-suk stepped inside the swing, twisted the wrist, and the weapon clattered away. Another shot cracked the air. He didn't duck. He fired once, precise, final. When the echoes died, fear remained, kneeling where men had stood. In the underworld of Seoul, everyone knew the rule. If Jin Woo-suk was involved, the outcome was already decided. 3 mornings later, the executive floor of Meridian Group hummed with anxious restraint. Assistants whispered. Investors stared at their phones like shields. Another interview for the executive assistant role. Another candidate expected to shrink. Then Avery Brooks walked in. She moved with purpose, shoulders square, eyes calm and assessing. Her blazer was crisp, her voice steady when she introduced herself. She didn't bow, she didn't apologize. She took the seat offered and crossed her legs like she belonged there. Woo-suk noticed the silence first, how it bent around her. Then he noticed her gaze. She met his without flinching. "You understand the demands of this role," he said, voice low, sharpened by years of command. "Long hours, absolute discretion." "I understand responsibility. I don't confuse it with fear." A murmur rippled through the room. An investor shifted, displeased. "This position favors adaptability. You'll be close to me, to sensitive matters." Avery smiled, small, controlled. "Then you'll want someone who won't panic when things get uncomfortable." The interview should have ended there. Instead, Woo-suk leaned back, curiosity tightening like a drawn wire. "You start today," he said. Objections exploded after she left. Warnings about image, about control. Woo-suk silenced them with a look. He had built empires on sharper risks. By the end of her first week, Avery understood the truth beneath Meridian Group's polished surface. The late-night meetings, the encrypted calls, the men who stood straighter when Woo-suk entered a room. She learned fast, worked faster, and never once asked questions she couldn't answer herself. Danger found her on a Thursday night. The underground garage echoed as 2 men stepped into her path. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. "Wrong floor," one said, blocking her exit. Avery's pulse kicked, but she didn't freeze. She shifted, elbowing past the first, heel driving into the second's shin. The lights snapped off. A gunshot cracked the dark. When the fluorescents buzzed back to life, one man was down, the other was on his knees, shaking. Woo-suk stood behind him, expression empty of mercy. "Leave," he told Avery, already dialing his security chief. She didn't move. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "You didn't have to." "They made it necessary," he cut in. The next morning, he fired her. Publicly. Headlines spun a neat story. Privately, money appeared in her account. Protection followed her steps like a shadow. Woo-suk watched from a distance he pretended was enough. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, an ambush outside a private club ended with Woo-suk bleeding on the pavement. When he woke in the hospital, Avery was already there, pulling a chair close. "You don't get to decide I vanish, not after you saved my life." Something in him shifted, subtle, dangerous. She returned to Meridian Group with a different title and more authority, sat in meetings, learned the numbers and the grudges. When rivals tested boundaries, she held the line. When threats whispered, she listened. The kidnapping attempt came fast and sloppy. A rival crew grabbed her in daylight, betting Woo-suk would hesitate. He didn't. By nightfall, warehouses burned and alliances shattered. Avery walked free, shaken but unbroken. On a balcony overlooking the city, Woo-suk finally spoke what he'd been denying. "You make me reckless," he said. Avery didn't look away. "You make me honest." The kiss wasn't gentle, it was a decision. The old guard noticed. His father demanded legitimacy, tradition, ceremony, proof. Avery agreed, knowing exactly what kind of target it would paint. At the engagement celebration, music cut mid-note as gunfire tore through silk and glass. Guests screamed. Avery dragged Woo-suk behind cover, heart hammering as bullets chewed stone. They survived. Barely. And as Woo-suk held her amid the wreckage, one truth burned brighter than fear. Love hadn't softened the war, it had sharpened it. The city didn't sleep after the attack. It watched. By morning, news feeds buzzed with speculation, stock prices jittered, and Meridian Group's rivals circled like sharks scenting blood. From the glass-walled conference room, Jin Woo-suk surveyed the skyline of Seoul, jaw set, mind already 10 moves ahead. He hadn't lost control at the engagement, he'd survived. That mattered. But survival invited tests. Across the table, Avery Brooks stood steady as executives argued in clipped tones. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When a director tried to sideline her, she slid a file across the table. Dates, shell companies, names tied to the shooters. The room went quiet. "They wanted panic," Avery said. "We give them clarity." A courier burst in, pale, shaking. "The port's locked down. Our shipment from the south vanished overnight." Woo-suk's gaze sharpened. "Which port?" "Busan." A rival move, bold, loud, an invitation. By nightfall, Woo-suk's convoy sliced through rain toward the docks. Avery rode with him despite Chen's objections. She wore a bulletproof vest under her coat, hair pulled back, eyes alert. The port lights flickered as engines idled. Cranes loomed like giants. When gunfire cracked, it came from above. Woo-suk pushed Avery behind a container as bullets sparked off steel. He returned fire with ruthless precision. Men fell. Sirens howled. The rival crews scattered, but not before a truck roared away, cargo intact and untouchable. Inside the chaos, a sniper's round shattered the container inches from Avery's head. She ducked, heart pounding, then spotted the muzzle flash atop a crane. Without hesitating, she grabbed a flare from a dock kit and fired it skyward. The red glare exposed the shooter. Chen's team neutralized him seconds later. Woo-suk looked at Avery with something like awe and fear. Back at Meridian Group, the board moved to cut losses. An emergency vote, a demand for Avery's removal. Tradition cloaked as control. Woo-suk arrived late, rain still on his shoulders, and ended the meeting with a single sentence. "Anyone who doubts my judgment may sell." The stock stabilized. The message landed. That night, a private call slipped past the filters. A voice Avery didn't recognize, calm, amused. "Congratulations on surviving. I'd like to meet." The name followed, dropped like a blade. Ryu Min Kung. The meeting place was neutral ground, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the river. Security doubled. Wind tugged at Avery's coat as Min Kung eyed smiling, hands open, eyes cold. He congratulated them again, offered a truce that smelled like a trap, and slid a photo across the table. Avery, leaving her apartment that morning. "Careful," Min Kung said softly. "I dislike misunderstandings." Woo-suk didn't reach for his gun. He leaned forward. "You've made yours." "Ha ha," Min Kung laughed. "We'll see." The trap snapped shut on the way out. Motorcycles boxed him in. Tires screeched. Gunfire chased them down the ramp. Avery kept her head, called routes, counted exits. A smoke canister rolled under the bikes. Chen's team burst through the haze. The convoy broke free, but a final shot cracked the rear window, grazing Woo-suk's arm. Back at the penthouse, blood cleaned, silence settled. Avery's hands shook this time. Woo-suk covered them with his own. "They'll keep coming," she said.
Yes, he replied, because they think you're my weakness. She met his eyes. Then let me be the blade. He nodded once. By dawn, Meridian Group announced a merger initiative that forced Ming Kong's shell companies into the open. Regulators sniffed, allies defected, pressure mounted. In response, Ming Kong struck back, leaking a falsified report tying Avery to the underworld. Screens filled with lies. Avery walked into the press briefing anyway. She spoke calmly, presented proof, named dates. The lie collapsed live on air. Ming Kong lost 3 partners by lunch. The city chose sides. That evening, Woo-suk took Avery to the balcony overlooking the lights. The wind carried the river's breath. "I wanted to protect you," he said. "You did," she replied, "by trusting me." Below, sirens wailed, another raid, another fracture in the old order. Somewhere in the noise, Ming Kong was regrouping, angrier and more dangerous. As the night deepened, Avery's phone buzzed once. A single message, a location, a promise. Tomorrow. Alone. Woo-suk read it over her shoulder. His jaw tightened, not with doubt, but with resolve. If you think the city's done escalating, don't blink.
Dawn broke thin and gray, the kind of light that made secrets feel heavier instead of revealed. Avery Brooks stood alone at the edge of the abandoned riverside complex, the city humming behind her like a living thing pretending not to watch. The message on her phone burned in her pocket. Tomorrow, alone. She had argued. Jin Woo-suk had listened and then agreed in silence, the most dangerous kind of consent. Trust sharpened into a weapon. She stepped inside. The building smelled of oil and old water. Footsteps echoed. A door slammed somewhere deep within. Then applause. Slow, deliberate. Ryu Min Kang emerged from the shadows, immaculate as ever. Smile calm enough to pass for kindness. "You came," he said. "That tells me more than any file." Avery kept her stance loose. "You wanted to talk." He wanted to see if you'd flinch. He circled, eyes assessing. "You didn't. That's rare." The floor lights snapped on, revealing armed men along the walls. Avery's pulse spiked, but she didn't move. Min Kang raised a hand and the guns lowered a fraction. "Relax," he said. "If I wanted you dead, we'd already be done." "What do you want?" Avery asked. "To offer you an exit." He stopped in front of her. "Walk away. Leave Seoul. I'll make sure you're untouchable." She laughed once, sharp. "You don't understand him." Min Kang smiled wider. "I understand men like him very well." The trap snapped. A shot rang out, not from Min Kang's men, but from the upper catwalk. Glass shattered. Avery dove as bullets ripped through steel. Min Kang cursed, shouting orders. Chaos erupted as a third faction poured in, firing indiscriminately. Avery crawled behind the generator, heart hammering. She saw Min Kang pinned down, blood streaking his sleeve. Their eyes met across the smoke. Mutual calculation, mutual rage. She didn't help him. She ran. Outside, engines roared. A van screeched to a stop. Chen's voice barked orders as Woo-suk stepped out, gun already up. He moved like inevitability, cutting a path through the attackers with cold precision. Avery reached him breathless, shaking. "You came," she said. "I said alone," Min Kang shouted from the doorway, fury cracking his composure. Woo-suk didn't answer. He fired. The third faction scattered, leaving bodies and silence behind. Min Kang vanished into the shadows, wounded but alive. They escaped, but the city felt different afterward. Louder, angrier. By afternoon, the retaliation began. Meridian Group servers went dark. Accounts froze. A board member resigned, live on television, citing unreconcilable differences. A prosecutor announced an inquiry. The knives were out, and they all pointed inward. Woo-suk gathered his inner circle. Avery stood at his side as he laid out the counterstrike. Asset shifts, legal pressure, a public audit that would force rivals into the open. It was brilliant, ruthless, risky. Do it, Avery said before anyone else could object. The first move worked. Then the twist hit. Evidence surfaced, real this time, linking Woo Sok's father to a decades-old massacre tied to Min Kang's rise. Old blood, old debts. The story exploded. Protesters gathered. Investors panicked. Woo Sok's father summoned them that night. The old man's study smelled of incense and regret. He didn't offer tea. "You've made yourself a liability," he said to Avery without preamble. "She's my partner," Woo Sok replied. "Then you'll choose." The father's gaze was iron. Family or her? Silence stretched. Avery felt it like a blade at her throat. She stood straighter. "If I'm the problem, I'll leave." Woo Sok turned to her, eyes dark. "No." He faced his father. "I choose the future." The old man's expression hardened. "Then prepare for war." It came that same night. A convoy ambushed them on the expressway. Tires blew, glass rained. Avery crawled across the back seat as bullets chewed metal. Woo Sok returned fire through the shattered window, steering with one hand, blood streaking his temple. They crashed through a barricade and vanished into side streets, sirens screaming behind them. Safe, for now. In the quiet after, Avery pressed her forehead to Woo Sok's shoulder, breath shaking. "They won't stop," she said. He kissed her hair, fierce and steady. "Neither will we." Across the river, Ryu Min Kang watched the news in a darkened room, arm bandaged, smile gone. He dialed a number he'd sworn never to use. "It's time," he said. And as the city held its breath, the next move was already in motion. One that would force Avery to choose between the man she loved and the life growing inside her. A truth she hadn't yet found the courage to speak out loud. Night swallowed the city whole. Rain hammered the streets as Avery Brooks stood alone in the penthouse bathroom, palms braced against cool marble. Her reflection looked unchanged, steady eyes, controlled breath, but the test strip on the counter said otherwise. 2 lines. Undeniable. A future pressing in, fragile and ferocious. She closed her eyes. In their world, secrets were liabilities. An explosion rocked the lower floors of Meridian Group's tower, fire alarms screaming as emergency lights strobed red. Avery grabbed her coat and ran, heart pounding not just from fear, but from the knowledge she hadn't shared yet. Jane Woolsack met her in the corridor, gun already in hand, jaw tight. "Basement generators," Chan shouted over the chaos. "Secondary team breached." They descended into smoke and noise. Gunfire crackled between concrete pillars. Woo Sok moved like a force of nature, clearing a path while Avery stayed tight to his shoulder, counting exits, spotting angles. A blast threw them apart. She hit the ground hard, breath knocked from her lungs. Woo Sok was there instantly, hauling her up. "Are you hit?" he demanded. "I'm fine," she said, and hated the lie even as it left her mouth. They neutralized the attackers, but the message landed. Min Kang was escalating. Again. The prosecutor's office announced formal charges, frozen assets, travel restrictions, a warrant looming. The timing was surgical. Inside the war room, screens glowed with maps and numbers as Woolsock laid out options: leave the city, burn the evidence, force a public reckoning. Avery's phone buzzed, an unknown number, a single sentence. "I know what you're carrying." Her stomach dropped. She slipped into the corridor to call back. The voice that answered was calm, unfamiliar. "You don't know me," the woman said, "but I know how this ends if you stay." "Who are you?" Avery asked. "A friend of your enemy and the only person who can get you out alive." Avery hung up, hands shaking. The city felt suddenly smaller, tighter. She returned to the room, decision hardening into steel. "We go public, now." The press conference was chaos. Cameras, shouts, accusations. Avery stepped forward and told the truth about the attacks, the coercion, the falsified leaks. She named Min Kang without blinking. Documents rolled onto screens. Timelines snapped into focus. The room shifted. Mid-sentence, a shot rang out. Glass exploded behind the podium. Woo-sok tackled Avery as security swarmed. Panic surged. Sirens wailed. They escaped through a service tunnel as smoke filled the hall. Safe house. Quiet. The storm outside pounding at the windows. Avery finally spoke the truth. "There's something you need to know," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm pregnant." Silence hit like a blow. Woo-sok stared at her, shock, fear, something like wonder breaking through. "When?" "Recently." He pulled her close, forehead pressed to hers. "Then we end this, tonight." They moved fast. Assets shifted offshore, allies activated, evidence packaged for regulators beyond reach. Chen coordinated raids with officials who'd been waiting for a clean opening. By midnight, Min Kang's shell companies collapsed in sequence. But Min Kang wasn't done. He struck where it hurt most, Woo-sok's father. The old man was taken from his estate outside Incheon, security neutralized with chilling efficiency. A single demand followed. Avery exchanged at the river. Woo-sok's rage was a living thing. "It's a trap!" "I know," Avery said. "We still go." The exchange unfolded under floodlights and rain. Min Kang stood smiling, father bound but alive. Guns everywhere. The river churned darkly behind them. Avery stepped forward. Min Kang leaned close. "You should have taken my offer." She met his eyes. "You should have learned when to stop." The twist detonated. Avery dropped to her knees, not in surrender, but to slam a device onto the pavement. Lights cut, smoke billowed, sirens surged. Chen's teams flooded in from both banks. Min Kang's men fired blindly. Woo-sok charged through the haze, reclaiming his father, bullets carving sparks at his heels. Min Kang tried to run. Avery saw the opening and the gun raised behind Woo-sok. She didn't hesitate. She stepped into the line, the shot grazing her shoulder, as Woo-sok spun and ended it with a single round. Min Kang fell, screaming, dragged under by his own men as they scattered. Silence returned slowly. At the hospital, Avery lay pale but stable. Woo-sok sat at her side, holding her hand like an anchor. His father stood at the door, older somehow, eyes softer. "You chose well," the old man said at last. Outside, dawn bled into the sky. The city exhaled. But as Avery slept, her phone vibrated once more. An encrypted alert she'd set weeks ago. A last contingency. A name she hadn't expected. The inspector. And a warrant signed at the highest level. Morning arrived like a held breath finally released. Sunlight crept through the hospital blinds, painting pale gold lines across Avery Brooks' face. The machines hummed softly. Outside the window, Seoul moved on as if it hadn't nearly torn itself apart. Jin Woo-sok watched her sleep, every rise and fall of her chest grounding him. For the first time in years, the violence had paused. Not ended, but paused. And in that fragile quiet, consequences gathered their strength. The inspector arrived before Avery woke. Inspector Park Jun-ho didn't wear a smile when he stepped into the corridor. He didn't need to. The warrant in his hand spoke loudly enough. Charges stacked with surgical care, each one designed to look righteous. Conspiracy, obstruction, racketeering. The kind of paperwork that buried empires under the pretense of law. "You can come quietly," Park said, voice even, "or loudly." Woo-sok read the warrant once, then folded it neatly. "You're late." Park's eyes flicked to the hospital room. "You've made powerful enemies. I've made honest ones too," Woo-sok replied. "You're here because someone told you to be." Park didn't deny it. "I'm here because the city needs an ending." The city didn't get one. By noon, the media storm hit. Live vans, breaking banners, a leaked audio clip, contextless, played on repeat. Investors panicked, old allies hedged. Meridian Group's stock dipped hard, then stabilized as Avery's contingency plan rolled out automatically. Independent audits, international oversight, every move timed weeks in advance. Avery woke to chaos and clarity. She listened as Woo-sok explained everything, his voice steady, unflinching. When he finished, she reached for his hand. Then we finished this the right way. The hearing was set for that afternoon. Inside the courthouse, tension thickened the air. Park presented his case with calm precision. Then Avery stood, not as an accused, but as a witness. She introduced evidence Park hadn't seen. Communications, payments, orders traced back not to Woo-sok, but to a coalition of rivals who'd weaponized the inspector's office. Names fell, dates landed, screens lit up. Park's composure cracked. The judge recessed, phones buzzed, officials whispered. When court resumed, the warrant was dismissed. Charges stayed pending, but redirected. Park Jun-ho was escorted out, stunned, career collapsing in real time. Outside, the crowd roared. That night, the river reflected fireworks from a city desperate for closure. Woo-sok stood on the balcony, arms around Avery, the world quiet beneath them. "We could leave, disappear," he said. Avery rested a hand over her stomach. "Or we could change how this place works." The wedding happened a month later. Traditional, public, unavoidable. Silk rustled, drums echoed, old families bowed, new alliances formed. It wasn't a surrender to the past. It was a declaration that the future had arrived. When Avery walked beside Woo-sok, she didn't look like someone entering a cage. She looked like someone claiming a throne. Their daughter was born in spring. They named her Luna, for light that thrives in darkness. The empire evolved, cleaner on paper, sharper underneath. Avery took her seat at the head of the table, decision swift, voice calm. Woo-sok learned restraint, not mercy, but purpose. Together, they were no longer monsters hiding in shadow. They were guardians of their own storm. On their first anniversary, they returned to the balcony overlooking the city. The same lights, a different world. "Do you regret it?" Woo-sok asked quietly. Avery smiled. Not once. Her phone vibrated. A single message, no sender, no signature. "The city always needs monsters. Choose what kind you'll be." She deleted it. Below them, soul pulsed, alive, dangerous, endless. Avery leaned into Woo-sok's embrace, their daughter asleep between them, the future unwritten and waiting. Because love hadn't saved them from the darkness, it had taught them how to rule it. If you stayed to the end, remember this. Power fades, fear shifts, but the bold ones who refuse to kneel, they rewrite the city itself. The story ends here, but the journey doesn't. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you're ready for the next unforgettable story.